Hello, I'm Michael Akobi. I'm a singer and songwriter. To date, I've released one album. I'm also an actor, writer, and stand-up musical comedian.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
In this film, we will delve deep into music's past to uncover its origins and trace its lineage to the present day. I will identify the significant moments that helped shape music, and we'll look at the key players who were instrumental, pardon the pun, in music's development. It's a monumental undertaking, but one that we'll share together. So join me on a journey as we journey through the journey of music.
Dickhead.
It's hard to picture a caveman beatboxing and waxing lyrically, but paleontologists working in Israel believe that this may indeed have been a reality. I travelled to the coastal city of Haifa in Israel, where excavation sites are beginning to yield human fossil remains that suggest some of our ancestors may have used the voice box to perform rudimentary acoustic effects. Dr. Brian Peppers is a paleontologist with the British Museum who has been working at this dig site just outside Haifa for the last decade. He explains what is being uncovered in the soils of Western Israel. So Dr. Peppers, what are you holding there?
What I'm holding here is the hyoid bone. It belongs to an early hominid. We know this because of its size and the corneal structures either side of the medium ridge. It's dated about 300,000 years old, around the time of Homo erectus.
Sounds like the name of a gay gladiator.
The bone sits in between the thyroid and the chin. Most mammals have them, and you and I have them. If you look at the medium ridge here, you'll notice that apart from the expected deterioration caused by time, it looks relatively well kept. This belonged to an ordinary prehistoric man, and if you notice the comparison between this and a more recent sample, which belongs to an ordinary Homo sapiens, you'll discover that there's a striking similarity. Now, if you look at this sample here, which is dated about the same time as the first one, what you notice here is some notches along the medium ridge. This suggests that there's been some constant friction and agitation of the bone over a long period of time. This is because of severe vibration.
God, what's he waffling on about?
Highly dynamic oscillations of the larynx. The ligaments and muscles connecting the larynx to the thyroid tug and pull on the medium ridge, causing these permanent indentations. The dynamic oscillations are caused by making deep, resonating bass sounds like so. We can tell this because we x-rayed the medium ridges on samples like this and compared them with famous long-term beatboxers like Bismarcky and Ready Rock C and a host of others. What we found in all these cases was an almost identical correlation in the markings. Cave and rock paintings were not rare during this Middle Paleolithic period, but we believe that this particular group of primitive ancestors had moved to the next stage of cultural sophistication, and were now combining audio storytelling, combined with, as funny as it may sound,
With beatboxing?
yes, we think so.
Wow! I'm trying to imagine like a caveman Snoop Dogg going yeah, what's up, motherfucker? Shit! Some scientists debate that the larynx was positioned low enough to enable us to talk at this stage in our evolution. But evidence suggests that prehistoric man was not just able to communicate by some form of verbal cue, but can manipulate the larynx into producing sounds. Prehistoric man was most likely influenced by naturally occurring sounds and rhythms, and so tried to mimic them. By mimicking nature, our ancestors were able to incorporate this into hunting techniques or created sound to alert tribe members of approaching danger. But it's what our ancestors did next that is astonishingly significant. They took mimicking natural sounds and incorporated patterns, tonality, and measured rhythmic repetitions, creating a more cohesive medium, and could now pass on stories, memories, expressed emotion, and shared experiences through song. For countless generations to come, humankind continued to create homogeneous sound, but there was a movement towards more complicated approaches to music composition. A gradual shift was made from the simple monophonic or one dominant melodic voice like that of a chant to more complex polyphonic music, two or more simultaneous lines of independent melody. This added richness and texture like that found in classical music. Although it's difficult to pinpoint exactly where polyphonic music originates from, many experts agree on its natural development with human musical culture. A popular exponent and master of polyphonic composition is perhaps one of my favourite composers of all time, Mr. Johann Sebastian Bach. I meet up with the eccentric classical music historian Professor Glenda Lung at the Museum of Fine Arts in Chicago to learn more about the famous maestro nicknamed El Guano. So, Professor Lung, can you tell me why polyphony is so often associated with Bach?
It's Bach.
Oh no man, what's Bach? 80!
During the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance, polyphonic music was very popular. So what Bach did was to take what was really a very challenging music construct and made it accessible for all, not just for the bourgeois and for the middle class, but for the greater society in general. Bach was a master at creating different distinct voices, working independently of each other and yet still complementing each other, then converging the voices periodically. This is very difficult to do, and if you get it wrong, it can sound horrible. So Bach showed what can be done with polyphony.
So why do they call him El Guano?
I don't think they called him El Guano. I don't know where you're getting your information from. Guano? That's some excrement of seabirds and bats.
Did I think he was mad as batshit or something?
No.
The interview ends abruptly when Professor Lung tells me that Johann Sebastian Bach communicates with her from the dead, and that he is communicating with her now. Bach has asked her to play something on the piano for us. Lifting weights, dumbbells, squats, 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 squats. Many people will be familiar with the lyrics, war, yeah, what is it good for? Don't ask me, I know nothing. The lyrics are from Edwin Starr's song titled War. It was just one in a long string of popular rock and folk anti-war songs that would provide the backdrop to a wave of anti-war sentiment sweeping America and many parts of the world. Songs like What's That Sound, For What It's Worth and Pump Up the Jam became anthems during the Vietnam War. When pictures of the horrors from the Vietnam War began to appear on television screens, the public took to the streets en masse demanding the removal of US troops from foreign soil. One particular genre of music is most synonymous with pain, misery and hard times. It is of course the blues. Much of Western music is born from the blues, including rock and roll, R&B, jazz, funk, hip-hop and the polka. I head to the French Quarter of New Orleans in Louisiana to speak with a man still plying his trade, just as the bluesmen did early on in the 20th century. It almost feels like stepping back in time. Bubba Walker has been playing the blues bars here in New Orleans for the best part of 30 years. He takes some time out to meet up with me in the back room of his favourite barbershop to talk about the blues. Bubba, thanks for meeting with me.
It's all right, it's my pleasure.
So, what does the blues mean to you?
It's my livelihood. It's how I put food on the table.
Do you hear the blues in most music today?
It's in everything. It's been around for a long time. You know Elvis, the Rolling Stones. These guys came along and really put it on the map, so the whole world was exposed to it. Then everybody picked a little bit, put it in their own music, and now it's everywhere. You can hear it in rap. You can hear it in heavy metal.
Well, that was a lengthy response. Who are your influences?
I listen to everybody. Booker White, John Lee Hooker, Charlie Patton. Growing up, I tried to listen to as much blues as I could. Robert Johnson, and of course, the master, Big Daddy Jones.
Bubba, thank you so much for meeting up with us. You know, being in the home of the blues, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to play a little something myself. You know, blues came out of things like slavery and segregation, but I've also suffered a great deal in my life.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
When the doctor told me that my indoor soccer days were over because of my ankle, it was the blues that helped me to heal. So I'd like to pay tribute to an old blues classic, Howlin' Wolf's iconic Smokestack Lightning. Well, smokestack lightning, shining like gold. Don't you hear me crying? A-woo-hoo, a-woo-hoo, a-woo. Bubba must have remembered a joke. After my performance, I continue with my research. Bubba Walker mentions Big Daddy Jones. He's referring to fella Crosses Jones, a pioneer and tantamount mythical character in the world of blues. Despite never achieving mainstream success with his more popular songs titled Gunneecha Coochie and Hubbado Gibbabo, it was his passion and shrewdness on how to market the music that would leave an indelible impression on the blues. I meet up with Alopecia Jones, the granddaughter of fella Crosses, to find out more about her famous grandfather.
Yes, baby, gonna eat your coochie. Hum, nom, 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 nom.
So this is the shrine to my grandfather.
Shrine. Like a Buddha.
This is the only known photo ever taken of my granddad. It was found recently at his property where he grew up in Tupelo. Up until then, all we had of him was a sketch drawn by a fan of his. And this was a card given to him on his 65th birthday from Elvis Presley. Because it says it right here, thanks for making it all happen.
Elvis Presley, really?
Yeah, it says it right here.
It's getting warm in here.
I can get you a drink. I can fix you up some of our famous southern iced tea.
Yeah, that'd be nice, thanks.
Right.
Fella Crosses Jones was integral in setting up what is known as the Chitlin Circuit, and as a young man travelled from bar to bar throughout the states of Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and up north to cities like Chicago and New York. However, like most bluesmen of that era, Jones struggled to make ends meet, and it was that struggle that inspired him to do something different to his contemporaries. Jones took his music outside the Chitlin Circuit, and he headed internationally. Jones crossed the border up north to Canada, and down south to Mexico, and even further down south to Brazil, spreading the word of the blues. On the condition that we meet in a public place, Alopecia agrees to a coffee and a chat at her local cafe, as I have a few more questions I'd like to ask her.
You look different.
It's European. Thank you. Are you sure you don't want coffee or something to eat?
I'm alright. I really can't stay long.
Okay. Hey, have you seen that film Sling Blade with Billy Bob Thornton?
No.
Well, I like the way you talk.
Do you have a boyfriend?
I'm not interested. I'm sorry, but I have to go.
Throughout the 60s and 70s, a new sound was emerging. That sound was called disco. People had become weary of war and politics. Psychedelic drugs, flares and afro had become the new norm, and the sound of marching military boots had been replaced by the sound of boogieing disco boots.
Disco became synonymous with dancing and fun.
With its stylistic origins rooted in funk, psychedelic, salsa and pop rock, disco was a culmination of infectious melodies and a driving 4x4 beat. Its popularity peaked during the late 70s and has enjoyed the brief resurgence in modern times. Disco did serve to bring to the fore an instrument that would change the landscape of music forever: the synthesizer. Tracing as far back as the late 19th century, electronic instruments were not a new concept. Early synthesizer prototypes, like the Talharmonium developed by Thaddeus Cahill in 1897, was used to send electronic signals through wire and heard on the receiving end through means of horn speakers. The Talharmonium was able to generate musical sounds by electronic signal using a tone wheel and is considered the first synthetic instrument to create these signals by means of additive synthesis, the technique of adding sine waves together to create a particular sound. This technology would later be used in the original Hammond organs. The synthesizer was not restricted to the sounds it could produce like traditional instruments and could create a range of entirely new timbres. This unique ability would lay the foundation to new styles of music, like dance, techno and all that stuff. Professor Walter Straczynski is an advanced mathematics expert and computer science lecturer at La Trobe University. He wants to show me some interesting experiments he has been conducting with the synthesizer. Professor Straczynski, what's this shit?
Well, for the last few years I've been experimenting with the idea of self-manipulating audio reckoning terminal, or SMART for short. Using a program we developed here at La Trobe, we asked a computer within the synthesizer to generate a sequence of random numeric integers and allocate a note to each digit from 0 to 9. Each time an integer crossed a predetermined threshold, let's say for example, a move greater than 50 digits in either direction, the computer would randomly choose a direction in an octave. It could move up an octave or down an octave. We wanted to find out if the computer could generate a link of unbroken auditory algorithms that made melodic sense, or would it just produce rubbish? The results are very interesting and not what we expected at all. I'd like to demonstrate one of our experiments now. That's just one example from many of a completely self-generated piece.
What's the point?
The application of this technology is broad, ranging from its artistic properties in creating a sort of avant-garde music. But I also know of scientists and colleagues who are using this method to try and better understand the random nature of subatomic particles in quantum physics.
Women, huh? I was feeling a little down, so decided I would go out with friends for a few drinks and some live music. Contemporary musicians build upon the accumulative achievements of their predecessors, and that spirit of experimentation and exploration continues to push the frontiers of music ever further. Conversely, the influence of things like marketing and commercialization has turned some genres away from its artistic expression, leading it down the garden path of uninspired, meaningless, and all too often predictable formulaic production. Far too often we see boy bands and pop divas saturating our TV screens with their tacky and whimsical antics. What would the ancestors of music make of all this? For many, music reaches down and taps into our deepest emotions and helps to embolden feelings of hope, faith, love and sorrow. Has music lost its soul? I want to talk to some people off the street to find out what they think. Hey! Hey buddy! Hey guys!
Harold, my name's Tony. Fuck my bum.
Yeah, man! We're probably not going to get a straight answer tonight. I remember what I told the crew once. I said, life without music would be like free falling. So they suggested I go skydiving to illustrate my point. I was like, skydive on this. Despite my protests, I arrived at the skydiving centre just outside Melbourne. To my surprise, awaiting me was an ex-girlfriend who caught wind of our film project and volunteered to help. I always thought we parted on bad terms, but she even insisted on helping to pack my harness and parachute for me. It was time to take to the skies. With butterflies in my stomach and sweaty underpants, I can't help thinking that perhaps there was another way I could visually illustrate a freefall, like maybe standing on a stepladder and dropping a potato. Suddenly my train of thought was interrupted when I'm told it's time to jump. Things were going well. Then the main and backup parachute failed to open properly. Oh, hey, I'm alright. Lucky for me, the tree and my tandem skydiver broke my fall. He's alright, he's not dead, just in a coma. Well, we've covered the evolution of music, from its humble beginnings, mimicking nature, to the progression onto more complicated arrangements thanks to polyphony. We visited the deep south of the United States and the home of the blues, the father to modern rock music and all of its offshoots. Finally, we looked at the catalyst for the dramatic shift into electronic music thanks to the synthesizer. I hope that this program has helped to discover a newfound appreciation for music, and that it has taught you a thing or two along the way. I know I've learnt one lesson. Don't ever trust your ex-girlfriend.